Hello, hello! Bl'Art here, with Dragon Seated in Heaven, the Balthier Heretics Shinryu fight. We're bringing a team of Vayne, Young, and Charlotta. Before we get into it, hit that like button if you want to support the video, and hit the subscribe button if you want access to, character evaluations and, community posts, I guess, are the things that you get out of that, but helps me out quite a bit, so hit that sub button if you haven't already. So what do we got going on here? We got debuff immune Tiamats. Scary stuff. So we're going to be going ahead and charging that gauge with Charlotta. You might be thinking, like, why Charlotta over, like, I don't know, like a core or something like that? Selfie, whatever. And the reason for that is, well, you'll see as we get there, but I wanted that gauge charge. I wanted that sweet Ketchi style Brave Gain on hits thing for Yang to make sure he caps. And, I mean, Charlotta's cool. Who doesn't like Charlotta? Vayne, of course, and Young are a tremendous combination here. This fight is, it's a little different than the fights we've seen recently. It definitely has the mechanics, as they say. For one thing, they're, as I mentioned, debuff immune, completely debuff immune, which is interesting because it really alters the way you gotta play. There are a lot of characters just straight up don't function without access to debuffs, and it also means you gotta think about your calls a little bit more. Go. Sword! There we go. The bosses also periodically buff themselves at certain health thresholds and at certain force gauge thresholds. I like this, the force gauge thresholds not just being like, oh, they get a bigger stat or something. Like, I like, some kind of mechanical change happening because it makes the fight have a tempo to it. Appreciate that. The thing with all these buffs is, once they hit 8 buffs, they mess you up real bad. So you really want to be able to dispel them or to hold them from keeping those buffs or something. Of course, Balthier being the featured character, he's a great choice for that, but our options for Dispel on this team are a couple of Dispel calls. You saw Pain and Faris, which we'll be bringing up later. Most importantly, though, we got Vayne with the Vanille E-Sphere. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be getting uses out of their Vanille E-Spheres in this fight. Counter units are probably great for that. Vayne, of course, being a rebreaker is tremendous for that. But we are going to be using some calls to supplement that because at certain points of the fight, you're going to be seeing they get a giant Brave Shield. And shaving that down is a pain, and if we can't shave it down, we can't break them, and if we can't break them, we can't dispel them with Vanille, so we got a couple of calls that we're going to just slot in and prevent that Brave Shield from being a problem. Here we go. Here we go. Alright, into the Force time. Mostly we were just setting up here. The reason, by the way, that we used Charlotta for the gauge charge, instead of something like, say, like a core that would have just added to our damage, is because there was one piece of this fight I wanted to avoid, which is once the enemy does their force attack, it dispels and applies a framed, HP poison. The poison, like, whatever, that sucks. It's annoying, but we can deal with it. I didn't want to deal with the dispel, just, it sounded like it was an inconvenience. I've ever since, like, the Ceodor centipedes, I figured out that my least favorite mechanic in this game to deal with is buff dispel. That is when the enemy dispels you. Like, as I've said before, totally fair mechanic, it's fine, I just don't like the way it feels, so I try to avoid it whenever possible. I guess it's my equivalent of boss turn anxiety. I have buff dispel anxiety. That's okay. We are in the burst phase now. We are going to be chunking them, dealing Mondo damage, thanks to the Charlotta burst phase, or burst effect also being up. We have the Rain's Call, and thanks to Charlotta, we're going to be refunding after each attack, so that's great. We're going to be full. You may have noticed, actually, with the timing of things, I did something slightly different in that I went into the burst phase with 9 turns left on force time. If you've been paying close attention to my other videos and to most other people's videos, usually people will go into a burst phase, if they do burst phase at all, at 8 turns in order to, so that on the last turn they can brother summon, and there we go. And in this case, it is going to be a bit of a damage loss of sorts, insofar as Vayne's turns are the turns that really drive the force gauge, and so having one less Vayne turn is going to mean a lower damage multiplier. However, you're going to see there is a specific reason why I'm doing this. I'm not crazy here. This was not a misplay, although I will say I definitely should have used Contempt instead of his skill 2. That's, nitpicking. I think it does actually cost me a turn at the end of the run, but it's okay. Here we go again. Woomph. There we go. I love that animation. Very cool. Alright, 87 million damage, something like that. That was pretty solid. Now, with 2 turns left, here we go, they get their double Brave Shields, they get their double turn stacking. It's weird. They don't warp their turns, but they do stack their turns up. The reason we did this is so we can dispel them with pain. Okay, damage for a call. That's not the important thing. The Brave Shield is gone now, so we can now summon and get the Brothers damage. I found that, if they have the Brave Shield, Brothers will not actually deal damage to them. I mean, I think it does Brave damage, but it won't deal HP damage. It doesn't gain Brave off that. I didn't realize that the summon actually stores the Brave that it builds up from its hits, but that's, something to know. So, there we go, nice and clean. We've gotten rid of practically all their mechanics. They have one more threshold where they're going to get another Brave Shield and stack up their turns even more, I believe. But that's okay. Yang has Faris Call to deal with that, and that will be the end of these doofuses. We're not quite there yet, though. We do have a little bit of just kind of cleanup to do in the form of working through the summon. Try and deal as much damage as possible, because why the heck not? Why wouldn't you? Van, of course, stacked up a bunch of free turns during his burst phase. Oh, the reason, by the way, another thing is a lot of people have been using their burst phase to charge up the force gauge, which I think is a very valid way to do things. For Vayne specifically, I like going burst effect into burst phase in short enough fights that he can get away with it. Specifically because by doing that, it freezes the enemy force gauge, and at different thresholds, they're going to be getting different buffs, you see. So I figured, you know what? Let's not give them a chance to, stack up a bunch of buffs during the force time, because that's just inconvenient. We're going to go ahead and freeze because they won't buff themselves at all during the burst phase, and then it all happens after the burst phase, and then at that point it's like, okay, cool, well, now we can, we're out of the burst phase, we're out of the force time, we can, use our calls or whatever. Excuse me. Okay, there we go, we're just charging up that gauge once again with Charlotta, because that's apparently how we're playing this. And Young's going to go ahead and use the Faris LD real quick, because she has refunds, it's just some free damage at this point. We're trying to stall to get that 100%. On the gauge, there we go. I was pretty sure that the base call would do it, but I didn't want to take any chances. Now we've dispelled the Brave Shields, and Vayne is ready to finish things off. Whoomp, whoomp, that's not what's going to do it, though. What's going to do it is, of course, a somewhat gratuitous extra force time. Because, again, we want to freeze that gauge, make sure they don't hit us with any sort of nasty dispels or HP poisons that might cause us to trip at the finish line. Now, I'm pretty sure he'd be dead here if I'd used that LD instead of that skill 2 earlier in the fight, but it's okay. We can finish things off now, make good on it with an LD Contempt Plus. Big damage, and there you have it. Alright, that's the Balthier Heretics out of the way. No debuffs used, of course. Pretty easy. Man, I like using Vayne. Anyway, thank you for watching. I appreciate you watching through to the end. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Adios.